This is a short story that happened when I was a kid in St. Paul, Minnesota, living in Frogtown. I am now 27. I don't really remember what age I was, but I know what I saw. I'll try to explain to the best of my ability. I lived in a duplex in Frogtown when I was younger. There was a top and bottom to this duplex, and I lived on the top floor. I didn't have a room, it's more of an extra space in the living room that I was sleeping in at the time because we only had 2 rooms on the top floor. Obviously, my parents had the other room, and my brother, being the oldest, got his own room. When I was younger, probably around 3rd or 4th grade, my brother and I would always play video games together. Sometimes he would play without me, so I always listened to his door to hear if he was playing games or not, so I could bother him because I wanted to play games too. One night, or early in the morning, it was really dark outside and everyone was asleep. I suddenly woke up and wanted to play video games. Sometimes my brother would be up at the time because he was up playing games on the weekends. I would walk to his door in the dark and go sit and listen to his door. While my left ear was on the door, listening, and my eyes were staring straight into the kitchen, I saw a dark figure standing over the pots and pans, moving its hands. It was moving so fast, like you could see multiple hands. It looked like it was searching for food or something. It didn't look at me. It just kept on doing what it was doing. I was sitting down and listening because I was still a kid. I didn't think much of it. I wasn't scared because all I thought about was playing video games. I thought that maybe it was my mom or my dad. I sat there for maybe a good 2 minutes staring into the kitchen with whatever was there. For those 2 minutes, it never bothered to look at me. But when I was about to leave because I didn't hear my brother play games at all, it took a sudden glance at me. I could see it looking at me in the dark with its dark eyes. You know that feeling when you're being watched. I didn't seem to care at the time because I thought it was either my mom or my dad, so I just walked back and went to sleep. The next morning, I asked my parents if they had been searching through the food yesterday because I saw someone going through the food and stuff. My parents denied it being them. I looked confused, and then it hit me hard. I realized what it was. I just told my mom, never mind, and just left it at that. Many years had passed, and sometimes I would drive past this house to see how it was now. Maybe different families are living in it now. All I know is that that house gives me the chills. There's just something off about that house. I always have reoccurring nightmares about living in that home. My cousin lived in a haunted apartment when he first got married. After his first baby was born, he decided that it was time to move into a place of his own to start his family. He and his wife didn't have much money, so they just settled for the cheapest place they could afford. Additionally, he just came out of jail, so it was doubly difficult because they were both struggling with their menial-paying jobs. They had searched all over the small town that they lived in and found a somewhat decent place at the edge of town. It was a small apartment with 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a small kitchen that had a door connected to the bedroom. There was a hallway with one of those small air vents at the bottom. These vents were typical of houses and buildings made in the 1970s. It didn't have many windows, so it was always kind of dark inside unless they turned on the lights. My cousin worked the graveyard shift and his wife worked during the day. They worked hard and barely had time to spend with each other. They would always split the care of their newborn baby because of their shifts. Their son had just begun to crawl. He slept in a crib next to their bed. One night, when they were both off, they decided to watch a movie. It was about 11 p.m. and they were getting tired. Their baby crawled to the vent in the hallway and started having baby talk with it. They didn't really think much of it, and his wife went to grab the baby. But as time went on, the baby would crawl back to the vent and talk into it. They both got alarmed and became suspicious. Then, another night, they went to bed and put their baby in the crib. They would often leave out a full bottle of milk next to the crib. During this night, the son started crying in the middle of the night, and his wife got up to feed it milk. She noticed that the bottle was half empty, and she was sure that it was full when they both went to sleep. She alerted him, and they both started getting scared. One morning, my cousin came home from work and was exhausted. He knew that his wife would leave soon, so he chatted with her for a little bit and went to bed to try to sleep. He always kept the bedroom door slightly open when he slept. As he dozed off, he heard his wife close the front door. He laid there with the hallway lights on and his eyes closed slightly. In that state of falling asleep and being awake, he saw a shadow walk across the hallway and into the bathroom. He heard the faucet turn on. He thought that it was his wife forgetting something and fell asleep thinking nothing of it. When she returned that afternoon, he asked her if she had come back that morning to get something. She said that she didn't. Their anxiety was only beginning to escalate. This next incident was what sent them packing. One night, while my cousin was asleep, he had a vivid dream. He dreamt that he was asleep on his stomach and he heard a noise in the kitchen. The kitchen had an adjoining door to their bedroom. In his dream, he reached underneath his pillow and grabbed his gun, which he usually has with him. He sat up and proceeded to put on his left shoe and then his right shoe. He got up and pushed open the door to the kitchen. As he opened the door, there stood an old man across the kitchen with scraggly gray hair and skin as pale as snow. Right then, he woke up and realized that he was sleeping on his stomach. He got up and played everything like how he did in his dream, getting his gun, putting on his shoe, and then proceeding to the kitchen. Right as he starts to open the door, he realized that he did exactly what he did in his dreams. But at this point, it was a little too late. The door swings open and he fears what might be standing there, waiting for him in the kitchen. To his shock, there was nothing and no one was there. Regardless, he was freaked out, and the next day, he and his little family moved out of those haunted apartments. Interested in sharing your stories? Submit them to HmongChronicles@gmail.com or in the description below. Here is the next story. Thank you. My old house is very haunted. There's many, and I mean many things that had happened in that house. It was big, beautiful, and cozy, but the feeling inside was unbearable, so we eventually moved out. Anyways, to get to the story, one night, my parents left to a funeral, leaving me and my siblings home alone. My two brothers and I were in their room chit-chatting about what noises that they kept on hearing every night. It seemed like someone kept on crying outside their window. Our windows lead to a rooftop. On top of the roof is our balcony. As we were sitting there talking, my brother all of a sudden stopped and had the most terrified look ever. He was like, "Did you hear that?" Me and my other brother just sat there confused. Right when my brother was going to explain what he had just heard, there was a sudden sound from their window. It was a loud cry of a girl. You could tell that she was sobbing very hard, almost as if she had just lost a loved one, but at the same time, the girl's cry was coming from inside the house instead. We got freaked out, so we screamed and ran to my parents' room. At that time, my oldest brother was still downstairs preparing a meal. He was the only one downstairs, so we yelled his name to come upstairs. We told him what we had just heard, so being the older big brother he was, he went outside and checked our rooftop and balcony, when all of a sudden, a woman's figure standing on the edge of our balcony with her back facing towards us fell backwards onto our hard cement floor. But for some reason, my brother didn't see anything on the floor. Instead, he heard our fence jingle really loud as if someone jumped over it. That night, my brother went to sleep upstairs in the attic. Our attic is big, wide, and beautiful with 2 rooms. He has his own room, and every night by his side, he would always have his flashlight on and his lamp, but on this night, it was off for some reason. My brother fell asleep when all of a sudden he heard a rattling at his door, as if someone was trying to get into his room. This terrified my brother. He woke up, realizing that his flashlight was off. He had a lamp beside him, and as he was trying to reach for it, he grabbed what felt like someone's ankle. He described it being cold and soft, as if someone was soaking their feet for a long time. He also said that it stank. My brother was so freaked out that he threw that foot or ankle away from his hands and quickly turned on his lamp. When he turned it on, there was nothing around him. The door was kept closed. As scared as we all were that night, we gathered in our living room, and my brothers took my mom's shaman blades and set it down by our side. We waited until my parents came home and told them. Eventually, my mom oneng for our family, but that didn't really end everything. A year of my childhood was spent in an old and haunted house. The house was dark in the daytime and cold during the night. Outside, the red paint on the wall was chipping away, and my parents tried hard to keep the grass alive. We lived in that place for only a short time, but the things experienced there are remembered for life. We had to throw away an old sofa. One night, when everyone was in bed, but not asleep yet, a sound came from the living room. It sounded like someone jumping on the sofa. There were 5 of us living in the house. My sister and I were still young, and we slept with my parents. My older brother slept in the other room, and all of us were in bed. I knew this because my older brother could be heard talking on the phone in his room. We never sat on the sofa again, and after a few days, my cousins helped pull it to the curb. One early morning, sometime in September, when the mornings have become cold, my brother rushed into the bedroom and woke everyone up. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. My brother was always the first to wake up because he had a morning job that began very early. "What is it?" whispered my parents. "Did you hear it? It sounded like children playing in the living room." "Yes, I heard it too," said my mom. In a similar event, my uncle came to visit and he slept with my brother in his room. Later that day, my uncle asked me why I knocked on the door so early in the morning. When he opened the door, I ran off to the living room before he could see me. That was strange because my uncle woke up before I did and was chatting with my parents in the living room even before I was up. I once overheard my mom talking on the phone with a friend who visited earlier that day. Her friend said through the phone, "Your little boy is very shy. I met him a couple of times on my way to the bathroom, but he ran away when I tried to talk to him." On that day, my sister and I were told to stay in the bedroom so we won't disturb the adults. We stayed there the whole time. My mom knew this, so she asked her friend, "Which one? What does he look like?" Her friend replied, "The little one, the one with long hair." My dad never lets the boys keep long hair. We always had very short, clean-cut hair. All of our childhood pictures showed us this. "Did you see his face?" asked my mom. "No," answered her friend. "He was always looking away." One afternoon, I heard a baby crying from the closet in the living room where we hung our coats and stashed the toys. I opened it and a doll fell out. It was one of my sister's old life-sized baby dolls. The crying stopped right when I opened the closet door. I still remember that house to this day. You should be careful of what you wish, but also be careful of what other people dare you to do. This is a true story that happened. Me and my 3 girls were playing truth or dare outside when we came back from school. Instead of turning the bottle, we just did rock, paper, scissors, and whoever loses first gets it. We were just playing until things got real. The area that we were in had an abandoned house where no one bothered to even go in or fix it up. I lost the rock, paper, scissors, so it was my turn, and I chose dare since my last one was a truth. My friend dared me to go into the house. I said no and would not go in, but they forced me, so I just went in. I opened the door and felt chills. I had goosebumps and all the hairs on my back were standing up. I was too scared to go in while I trembled in fear. I didn't want anything bad to happen to me, but since it was a dare, I went on. I stepped a foot in and heard a scream coming my way fast. I turned around looking for my friends, but they weren't there. Learning this from horror movies, I knew I had to finish this. I went on into the house and the door closed me hard, like a slam. I heard voices telling me to help them. At this point, I was shaking like crazy, but I tried to keep calm. I kept on walking through the hall. Right then, I felt something poking my back. I tried not to look because in horror movies, usually when you look back, you'd see something. I came up to two areas, the kitchen and living room. Then I heard a scream from the kitchen, so I decided not to go there and went to another area. While I tried to go into that room, a shadow came past my body and went upstairs. I was confused and creeped out. I screamed my friend's name, saying that I did not want to play this game anymore. Then I felt a hand on my shoulders, and it smelled badly, like very old garbage. I was planning not to turn around, but I accidentally did. I then saw my friends and ran to cry to them. I went home and told them everything. My grandma had to warn for my spirit to come back. The funny thing was that I never stepped into the house. From what my friends told me, I was just standing there the whole time. It was weird and confusing, but I'm happy that it was over. This story sounds fake as hell. I believe we all know the saying that babies and little kids are very sensitive to spirits, whether it's seeing, hearing, or communicating with them. I have a few episodes of these stories that happened to me and my little niece during her sensitive years. My brother and sister-in-law were both working and going to school during this time. My niece was about 2 to 3 years old and I was a junior in high school. During that time, it was like my prime time in school, so I was ready to graduate with the exception of a few required classes. So unlike a lot of other students, I didn't have a lot of homework or schoolwork to worry about. I would usually come home from school to help babysit my little niece while my brother and sister-in-law were at school or at work. My parents and other siblings helped during the day or whenever they came, but it usually came down to me. I didn't mind it because I loved my baby niece a lot and enjoyed my time with her. Although my niece was 2 to 3 years old already, she doesn't talk much. She still uses a lot of gestures to indicate what she wants. Because of this, we have to carefully interpret what she needs or wants. Not to mention she's physically tiny for her age, maybe due to her premature birth. But she is the sweetest little girl in the world and has beautiful huge black eyes and the cutest rabbit smile ever. The first time I noticed anything strange happening and her weird behaviors was one evening while I was babysitting her. We'd been up playing and goofing around all day, so by this time, I knew it was her nap time. I laid her next to me in bed trying to soothe her to sleep. She was still giggling and trying to mess with me as I tried to calm her down to take her nap. We were playing a peekaboo game earlier, so she kept turning away from me and then quickly turning back to me, seeing my reaction of boo to her, and she would laugh for hours. She kept turning away from me and turning back to me, but I'll just smile and pat her softly. Usually she'll get the idea and stop, but for some reason, she kept doing it, turning away from me and turning back. After a while, the table turned and I was the one knocking out. I sat up for a second to wake myself up, and that was when I realized that my niece was still doing the same movements, but this time, she was laughing at the opposite direction of me. She'll turn to me, not laughing, and then turn to the wall and laugh. When I realized this, it suddenly sent shivers throughout my whole body. I quickly picked up my niece and said, "What are you doing?" She stopped laughing and suddenly lifted her 2 little fingers to her eyes and pulled down the bottom lids and stuck out her tongue. I admit I was freaked out, and before I knew it, I jolted out the door and into the living room where the rest of my family was. At least to say, I did not sleep in my room that night. I didn't think much about it, and after a couple of nights, the first incident was completely forgotten and life went back to being normal. Not to mention, I did move my bed to another part of the room. Once again, I was with my niece playing around with her. She was sitting on the floor facing me, and the back faced to the closet. I was lying on my stomach on top of the bed. I had an egg in my hand, in which I was trying to exchange with her for the handful of cherries that she had that she was squishing with her fingers. From my room, I could hear my family in the kitchen talking about the cherries that they had just picked, but I was focused on not having my niece squeeze cherry juice all over my room. As I was trying to get her attention to give me the cherries, she was having fun fooling me, like she was going to give it to me, but will quickly pull it back. I was still trying to get her to give me the cherries when I heard my mom call for me from the kitchen. Just as I was about to stand up, my niece quickly turned to the half-open closet and suddenly started crying. Before I knew it, my tiny baby niece somehow climbed up the bed and threw her tiny body up into my arms. I didn't even get the chance to ask her what was wrong, because when I looked down at her, she already had her fingers under her eyes, pulling her bottom lids and sticking out her tongue. I was scared completely and ran out of the room crying and shouting for my parents. Needless to say, my niece refused to go back into my room after that. And yes, for the 2 years that we lived in that house, she refused to sleep and hang out with me in there. Oddly, she wasn't the only one that had these odd behaviors. 3 of my other nieces had similar actions while in my room, but my brothers joked that maybe it's my room that's haunted. I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Our uncles moved into that house after us, and nothing ever happened to them.